Hey everyone, my name's Amrita and I'm a registered clinical counselor out here in Surrey, BC. Today I'm going to be talking about all the toxic and cringy things I used to do before going on my own healing journey and before becoming a mental health practitioner myself. The first thing I can remember if I reflect upon childhood, earlier years, is always being in a mode of self deprivation, I'd say, is the best way to capture it. So I recall restrictive eating at a very young age. I suppose, well, not I suppose, I know what the research says is that your food, when you're a kid, your food intake is one of the few things you can have control over. And so, if there's a lot of things around you that are changing, for example, if you've moved cities or schools, then your food will often be the first place that you go to try to gain some autonomy or control. So I can recall depriving myself and going hours, if not the entire day, without eating at a very young age. I also remember not really starting to drink water until like my late 20s, if not early 30s. So again, just not being tuned in to my hunger cues, a little bit of the autonomy and control compensation coming in. I've mentioned this before in a few of my videos, but I also never used to wear a jacket, even if I was shivering and freezing. And I think that comes down to just having low self-esteem and not wanting to be seen and wanting to take up as less space as possible. But I'd classify those things as being toxic because they were toxic to myself. I had very low self-worth. I felt maybe that some needs weren't being met as a child, and then self-deprivation, whether it was about temperature, hunger, or thirst, just became the norm for me. And I carried those patterns well into adulthood. This one is funny. And it's something, when it was happening, it wasn't funny. So, anger problems. How many of us have a little bit of a temper or an anger problem? So, I remember this only went away definitely after I went to a therapist after I had my daughter, because anger is a secondary emotion. It's not a standalone emotion. So usually when there's a lot of anger built up, that means there's also a lot of trauma under it. So a lot of things that have been repressed, traumas, insecurities, unmet needs, wounds, and a ton of grief, right? The biggest culprit for anger that we seldom realize is what's going on there. But I am short. I've always been on the shorter side. So imagine me just ready to pop off like a linebacker, ready to tango, whether it was on the road, out on a night on the town, on vacation, within my own friendships, relationships. Anger was the driving force of a lot of my relationships and interactions. I took everything personal. I was very defensive. I had no emotional regulation strategies. So this happens a lot to children who have had maybe grief or unresolved trauma, or maybe there's a lot of anger in the household. So it's kind of monkey see, monkey do. You learn and become acclimated to a lot of activated high emotions. And so that becomes embedded into your nervous system and the way you respond to stress and anxiety. But yeah, I was all but 5'3" and always just ready to throw down. It's quite embarrassing to reflect upon, but I can remember several instances where this was definitely something that I needed to overcome. And I think it's one of the biggest reliefs that came out of counseling therapy was finally being in control of my own emotions and not having that regret or shame after an angry outburst. Okay, this is another one that I think is so prevalent with a lot of our moms, but our generation as well, the impulsive spending. Oh my goodness, this one took a while to kick. So, of course, it's a coping mechanism, it's a soothing strategy. When you feel like there's voids in your level of life satisfaction, when you have hurt feelings, when you don't have healthy self-soothing or coping mechanisms, it's really easy to turn to purchases and material things. Impulsive spending isn't just about shopping or clothes, it's also about services or treatments, ordering food, all this DoorDash and skip the dishes. Impulsive spending, your spending habits, your credit cards, all those kinds of things are telltale signs that maybe there's some unmet needs, wounds, or insecurities that haven't been tended to, or maybe there is deep trauma that needs to be taken care of. And impulsive spending is also a symptom of certain personality disorders, but it's also a symptom of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. So when you have voids and wounds that you're trying to satiate or fill or soothe, that is the way of the world and society right now. And because it's so normalized, we don't really put it into the maladaptive or unhealthy category, because sometimes it can be cloaked as self-care, where in reality, if you're spending against your budget, that's the opposite of self-care. It's actually self-damaging. So that's something I'd say that took a while, and it was EMDR that really helped kick that habit, because EMDR gets deep into the neural networks and it's not going to leave any crevice of your brain unaddressed. So definitely my most recent experience with therapy is where I was able to get over those toxic spending habits. Talk about a liberating one. Let's talk about one that feels so good when you overcome it. And again, seldom can we do it without third-party, unbiased external help like a therapist. But I had the toxic habit of becoming very hyperfixated on interpersonal issues. Like if I was in a fight with someone, if I had conflict with someone, if I wasn't getting along with someone, a lot of my topics reference certain things that are common issues in the South Asian community. And as we all know, we can end up ruminating about those issues, whether it's family problems, in-law family problems, and it can really start to take over our mind and body and make us quite ill. So ruminating, overthinking, personalizing, hyperfixating, almost to the point of obsession. And so when it's hard for you to enjoy the things you used to enjoy, or you're staying up at night thinking about conversations, replaying what was said and thinking about what you wish you had said instead, or really allowing it to completely hurt your feelings to the point of where you don't even like yourself anymore. Maybe you're starting to blame yourself, that you've been gaslit so much that you internalize all the villainizing, all the shaming, all the criticisms. So it is really, really hard to try to relinquish control over other people's behavior. But at the end of the day, ruminating, internalizing things, and being self-deprecating and hyperfixating on the negative people and relationships in your life is a toxic trait of your own that can be fixed and remedied with the right help. Segues into a neat little tendency that I didn't realize I was doing until very recently. I mean, it was always in the subtext and maybe in the peripheral, but even just while I'm saying this, try to take note for yourself. Do a little inventory check of your social life. I think a toxic thing I did since I was a kid up until now, up until recently, is gravitate towards mean people or toxic people, because I think their rejection or hurtful comments, behaviors really helped access the rejected or unaccepted parts of myself that I had been seeking validation for. So that's not an uncommon thing, that we're creatures of habit, so we'll gravitate towards what is familiar. So let's say if we grow up in an environment where we're the ethnic minority, or maybe we're the youngest with big age gaps, or maybe our parents were really busy working, as a lot of our South Asian parents were, then we're going to have a lot of parts of us that don't feel like we're accepted, fully belong, or like we're psychologically safe. We won't feel good enough. Another thing is love is often really conditional in our family systems. So then in adulthood, we can tend to veer towards people who are passive aggressive, who are unkind, who are mean-spirited, and it feels like we need to gain their validation in order to heal our inner child. It's not really grown us making those decisions to hang out with those people or be close to them or try to gain their approval. It's more so our inner child that's remembering what that rejection or lack of attention or acceptance used to feel like. So making the intentional shift to move more towards the kind people who make you feel relaxed and calm, not anxious and stressed. That was another toxic thing that I definitely used to do. I would sabotage and distance myself from healthy, kind friendships and relationships and family members. and instead go towards the ones that it was pretty apparent they really didn't like me. So, how many times can you maybe think of that happening in your own life, whether it was childhood, adolescence, or adulthood? And maybe that's another toxic trait that we can have grace and self compassion for, but still put it on the radar for something that needs to change. This one's probably a culturally shared phenomenon, but being really hyperfixated on looks. Fun fact, when I was, how old was I? 26? Yeah, I had rhinoplasty done. I actually had a very large hump on the top of my nose, and it was kind of maybe disproportionate to my face when I was a child. So it was often a lot of family members, like elders, would pull on it and squeeze it, trying to make it thinner. I became very self-conscious about it. As I've discussed in other videos, our culture is very overconsumed with looks, fair skin, skinny bodies, small features, and it's a self-rejection, right? It's all the internalized racism and the desire to essentially be Caucasian rather than what we are, and not embracing our natural features as have come from up the way in the lineage. So I ended up disliking my nose so much that I went under the knife. I don't condone having plastic surgery. That's not why I'm bringing it up, but I'm bringing it up just to mention that I'd say that was a pretty toxic thing for me to be that obsessed with looks and my physical appearance to the point of spending a pretty penny and having pretty dangerous, very grueling rhinoplasty and plastic surgery. So that is definitely something I would say has been a work in progress in being more self-accepting, especially as women age, their bodies change. I spent a lot of my life being severely underweight. And when I was a kid, that was always emphasized, and I was always getting in trouble for being really skinny and slender. And then the opposite started happening after I had kids, another shared experience that I hear a lot from clients. So you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place when it comes to looks. There's always going to be something to criticize. There's always going to be a perceived flaw. So of course, self-love, self-acceptance, and not being so focused on the outside appearance, but more so what's inside, is always a healthy shift to make, and definitely something that therapy can help with as well. Last but not least, something I thought I would not speak publicly on, but goodness, it happens to the best of us. Not to make light of it, because it is a serious issue in our community. Alcohol dependency. This was probably the most toxic thing that I have ever fallen susceptible to. It was a slow burn, definitely. It accumulated over many years. I wouldn't say that I ever had like a full-blown issue with alcoholism. Because of course I was able to recognize that there was a dependency going on. It was essentially a crutch for stress management, numbing out emotions. It was before I had my EMDR therapy and other counseling modalities, before a lot of changes that needed to happen in order to overcome that crutch and that unhealthy coping mechanism, but something not enough females are talking about. I think there's a huge stigma, and it's really something that we shouldn't be ashamed of because society normalizes it so much. And a lot of people are functional alcoholics. So that glass of wine that you reach for at the end of your day or at the end of the week, or even if you tell yourself it's not every week, at the end of the day, you are using it to resource yourself and to numb out emotions and to check out or to put stuff on the shelf. So you know that old saying, whatever we repress, the body will express. So sooner or later, since it is a drug, at the end of the day, we can become dependent on it. Our body will physically start to crave the alcohol, and countless studies now, all that wine is good for you, it's all been debunked. So definitely this is something I want to make a whole nother video for and talk about more in depth, but I'd say that was the biggest toxic thing that I was doing in my life, was for a short while depending on alcohol for mental and physical relief. If any of these things sounded relevant for you or maybe jostled some things up, sometimes it's hard to take a look at our shadows. Just know that these are not personality traits. The tendency to veer towards mean people rather than nice people, to rely on alcohol for self-soothing, to binge shop or practice restrictive eating, that's not something we're born with. It's more so trauma responses. So giving yourself lots of grace and self-compassion. And maybe if you've been on the fence about is it time to go on that healing journey or not, just book a consultation. Book a consultation, reach out, email me at contact@therapycovecounseling.com. I have recently just started incorporating EMDR, which I don't even have the words to explain how amazing it has been. Every single day I get the gratifying moment of seeing it click in someone's eyes while we're doing the treatment, while we're doing the eye movement desensitization. It's unreal. Our brain is wired to be adaptive and to heal and move past negative tendencies, repressed trauma and hardships, all those hurts and pains that we think are just there and set in stone and concrete, they're not. EMDR has a very high success rate. It's the most researched therapy modality out there. I honestly cannot say enough good things about it. So it's changed my life personally, and I get to do that for other people every day. I hear, holy smokes, I don't know what magic this is. I had the best sleep of my life. I haven't felt like this ever. A lot of things that are in the corners of our brain can come out to be processed. It really is quite spectacular and phenomenal. So if you're curious about it, book a consultation. We can have a chat. You can ask whatever questions you have. If you're ready to take the plunge and give it a go, I have in-person sessions that I'm now offering for women out of my office in Surrey. Otherwise, virtual appointments are always available for anyone who wants or needs them. As usual, thank you all for watching. See you next time.